Welcome to the Worship Leader Toolbox podcast. Today we're going to talk about 3 basics for worship leadership: scheduling, charts, and rehearsals.
Welcome to the Worship Leader Toolbox podcast, where our mission is to equip and encourage worship leaders and teams in practical components of local church leadership. We're so thrilled to have you listening to our podcast, and our prayer is that it's helpful for you and your teams. If you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to reach out to us at worshipleadertoolbox.com. And we'd also be honored to have you hit subscribe wherever you're listening to us. Let's join together in today's episode starting now.
Okay, I'm here today with Tim Price and Drew Allsman, and we're going to invest some time today talking about these basics. But first, hey guys, how's it going?
It's going great.
Yeah, it's going well.
Good. Drew, it's been a while since you've been on the podcast, and in fact, you were actually on the very first one, and were a key component of getting this Worship Leader Toolbox podcast off the ground. And here you are on number 43. It's been a fun year, and how's it going?
Yeah, it's crazy to think that it's been a whole year. I remember when we kind of started this whole thing, just sitting around talking about worship all the time. We're like, we might as well just record some of our conversations, at this point. And yeah, it's crazy to think back that, with the blog starting and some of the resources that have rolled out, and that it's been a whole year. So it's great to be back and doing this again. So
yeah, that's awesome. And Tim, how are you doing?
I am doing well, and been a little marker here of Easter and this last couple weeks, and that's been interesting because it seems like a lot of people are in the mode of thinking Easter was a marker, and in some ways it kind of was for a lot of places. So people come back to church and people thinking about getting things rolling again. So yeah, it's been good.
New birth in the church.
Yep.
That's good. But before we jump in, I want to ask you guys a fun question. So put on your thinking caps, and this is COVID related. What is the one restaurant you love but haven't eaten in since the pandemic? So what's that one restaurant you love since you haven't eaten in since the pandemic?
Well, I could share in a nutshell. We hardly ate any restaurants during the whole pandemic, even if they were open. And around here, most of them weren't. March 13th of 2020, last year, we ate at a little Surfside Shack in Surfside Beach, Texas. That's hard to say. And then we came home from that trip, and the pandemic started, and we haven't eaten inside a restaurant again until about 2 weekends ago at Panera Bread in Branson. So I don't know. But halfway through, we're like, well, is this our motivation because of the pandemic or because we're just now saving money and whatnot and have got a new rhythm? But it's also weird to calculate how many meals we've eaten at home.
Yeah.
900 and something in a row or something like that. Crazy. But to answer the question, the restaurant that'd be fun to go back and eat in would be Joe's Pizza.
Yeah.
Here in Troy.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Yeah, I think for me, the thing I miss most through the pandemic is the community that's come from being able to sit inside and talk with people while you eat. Like, I think that's the thing I miss the most. And one of those places, oddly enough, was McDonald's for me. Every week, Clint, you and I would go to McDonald's and for breakfast at least once a week and talk about just life and stuff like that. And we haven't been able to do that for a whole year. So it's been basically going through a drive-thru, getting some coffee, getting some food, and sitting in our cars and talking. It's been just weird for a whole year, basically. So
yeah, I'll have to piggyback on McDonald's also because I really like that. But now we're gonna have to. It's getting nice outside, so we're gonna have to bring our folding chairs so we can just sit outside our cars like the old people do there.
Yeah, I saw them as I was driving by. Today,
oh, they
actually, they're there.
So
you could take your canopy tent.
Ooh, nice.
Oh, nice. A pop-up, just kind of have a, just kind of claim a space.
I did it with my brothers in one of the barbecue places.
Oh, that's
before they got there. I set it all up. It was out in the parking lot.
That is hilarious. Oh, man. All right, guys, let's jump into these 3 basics for worship leaders. But in this, there's a bit of a 80-20 rule here. It's investing 20% into these areas can really bring about 80% of its fruitfulness in worship leading with the team. And here's the 3 areas. It's good scheduling, good charts, and a great rehearsal. But before we jump into each of these areas, do you guys kind of agree with that a solid investment into a small part really provides a huge benefit? And how do you guys see this playing out?
It seems like if you got these things down well, these 3 things, that it doesn't require a ton of upkeep. It's just, it just keeps the rhythm going.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely these things provide a huge benefit.
Yeah, I think once you get the foundation of these things going, that, like you said, the upkeep isn't terribly difficult or time consuming. It's the initial, to make sure that you make the connection with people and you get in the flow of scheduling them, and with charts and music and all that stuff, making sure that all that stuff is on Planning Center, whatever software you use, and just kind of as you add a new song, it becomes less cumbersome. So I think once you have the foundation for these, it's not a huge upkeep to do, every single week.
Is there another software besides Planning Center that people use like that?
Anymore? I don't think so. I mean, like there might be, but yeah, I think that's kind of the standard at this point.
Yeah.
Anything I've ever done from first serving in music ministry like 15 years ago to now, it's always been Planning Center.
It's crazy. They really have a monopoly on that.
Yeah. When you're doing it right, you're doing it right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I would say, too, then the third one was great rehearsals. And I think if you have those first two things down well enough, your rehearsals become a whole lot easier to manage as well, because you have people coming in more prepared and things like that. So, yeah, I would say that if you really have a good foundation for these, that it doesn't take a whole lot of upkeep every single week.
That's awesome. Well, I want to jump into each of these areas. So the first one is good scheduling. And, think about this, you can think like large church demographic or even small church demographic, and this is going to look different for you, but the practical advice would probably apply the same. But what does it take? What has it been in your experience for good scheduling?
We got to have people.
People. Oh, people.
There's a lot of components to this, so I'll just throw out a couple, but one of them is you do have to work with your people and build them into some kind of group. So, I mean, this isn't just a guy behind the curtain, just throwing names out there. There's got to be a relationship with people getting in the groove. And then, knowing kind of what your outcome is going to be, so that you're able to pull in the people that you need for that particular thing or whatever.
That's good. Yeah. And kind of what you're saying kind of jumped in my mind is that good chemistry, right? Because you can have let's just say, your church is blessed and you have 5 guitar players. Okay. Now, and if they're all really good, well, but they might not mesh well. You know what I mean? So knowing who plays well with others and who complements and raises each other up when they play together, that's a whole another level of thinking about things, Yep. So if you're in that predicament, that's a blessing. But that's another thing is knowing who has good chemistry with one another.
Yeah, and one thing I was thinking about as you guys were talking about this is managing, burnout, and to do that, you have to really be in tune with your volunteers and what's going on in their life. And so I think that connection is a big part of it too. It's more than just hey, you're on the schedule, but also getting to know those people and what's going on in their life, so you can really manage when they're serving, how often they're serving, things like that. Because the more you take care of your people in that regard, the more they're going to want to go to battle for you and to be a part of the team, things like that. And that plays into this as well, I think.
Yeah, if you're going to have a long-term approach to it, then you can't just stick people in willy-nilly and never really connect with them. And so there's been some people that I've scheduled on Planning Center and even before Planning Center existed, and they're still playing the band. They were all the time they're around and a part of things. And there's been a lot of seasons where I've had an opportunity to say, man, if things are getting haywire, with your family issue or this going on or somebody's sick or whatever, then just let me know. Or sometimes I've even said, I'm taking you off this week just because I'm sure that it's not going to work well with all that you have going on based on your Facebook post or whatever it is. And that could never happen if you're just scheduling a corporate mindset. This is a relational thing that you're thinking of.
So you guys both talking about, honoring people's time. So as worship leaders, or if you find yourself on staff, you might find yourself playing every single Sunday or, 3 out of 4 or something like that. So what kind of limitations do you put for either your volunteers? When you guys are scheduling or whenever your worship leader is scheduling, what's the limitations that you have? Is it every other week at most? Is it, 3 out of 4? Or what do you do? Once a month if you have enough? Or how does that work for you guys? What are your thoughts?
I guess I'll go first. Yeah, Tim was looking at me like it. I think for me, it's just really, like I said, knowing your volunteers, so what they're capable of. Some people might have more space in their life, and also just having that relationship with them where you have a culture they can tell you, I can only do this much. You don't ever want to have a culture where people just say yes because they're scared of saying no or feel like they can't say no. You want them to be able to feel like they're in a culture where we care about them and their lives, and so they should be able to feel okay saying, yeah, I just can't do this. This is the max that I could do. So I don't know if there's really like an all around rule for this basically, but I would say if you have someone consistently playing 3 to 4 times a month, that's probably pretty scary, and you probably need to have a conversation, because that's a lot for any non-paid staff person to be doing and volunteering, I think.
But it also depends on the nature of your church. So like whenever we only had one service that the praise band played at, we had pretty much the same band for a decade.
Yeah.
And everybody's happy because like it's not a huge commitment. Like you show up on Sunday morning, you do a quick sound check, you crank through the songs and then sit around and talk. There's a lot of just mutual like community in that. As soon as we went to more than one service for the worship band, then that changed the mentality, because all of a sudden if you're on the schedule, it's like a 10-hour week commitment for the week.
Yeah.
Like rehearsal, be there, sound check all morning long. It's like a part-time job.
Yeah.
So you can't do every single week but then there's also the weird thing of seasons of life. So if somebody's got little kids, then they're missing out on kids' bedtime. They don't want to be there every single Wednesday night. And even if they did want to be, it's not a good season of life for that. Like, then you got a newly retired person that just got done working, and they feel like they have like 60 plus extra hours a week, and they're happy to do anything under the sun. So still, you don't want them to burn out, but you kind of just get to know. And then one other aspect to it is the high points, like to watch the high points, like you and not that it's seniority type mindset, but you want to build community by inviting people to be a part of things like big Sundays, like Christmas things, or times when everything's going to be. And also the same vein, you don't always want to have the same group on 4th of July weekend. Like you just kind of want to mix and match so that people are able to balance life and keep it all straight. So
that's good.
Yeah, and really quickly before we move on to the next point, one other thing is we were talking about this that goes to me in hand with good scheduling. It's imperative to be enough in advance for people so that they can make those determinations on their life. So if they know that, and this goes both ways too. It's partly on the volunteers letting you know when they can and can't serve, but being enough in advance that people have the ability to say yes or no confidently and know what's coming up versus like a last minute ask or something like that. I think that goes in line with good scheduling and habits and stuff like that is to make sure that you're giving them an opportunity to really evaluate what's going on in their life in a given month or a given week and not feel pressured to say yes the week of, things like that.
Yeah, that's the weird balance because if you schedule people 90 days out, they don't know what's going on. If you schedule people 7 days out, it's a slap in the face.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what it is. It's like 27 days is like perfect or something. I don't know what the formula is, but it can't be too far and it can't be too close.
Yeah, if you can get that close to a month, I think that's generally I found that that's a good balance for a lot of people. They kind of know what's coming up in a given month, but if you go beyond that, they have no idea what's coming up. So
what just happened is a beautiful bookend, because Drew, your first podcast you were on was about advanced prep. And now you're here again talking about advanced prep. So if you haven't heard that first episode, go back and
there you go
and hear how things have evolved
and see if it's all still right.
Yeah,
yeah. I hope that I said the same things back then that I say now.
He's contradicting himself.
You get on there. The first episode's like, and schedule people every week if you can. That's the best way to do it.
Grind them out.
There's always more people.
Oh my goodness, that's so good. No, those are really good. And we don't have to dive into everything because, like I just said, go back and listen to that advanced prep one. There'll be a lot of things that we talk about in there for like scheduling and stuff like that. So check that one out. But number 2, good charts. Man, there's so many different ways to go about this. But how does this benefit your teams? Good charts. Wait, for those, I mean, do I have to say like good charts? Do I have to say what that is?
Might as well.
Okay, so like, if you're listening to this,
I'm a drummer, so I don't know what charts are.
Okay, perfect. And drummers
I memorize chords easily, so I always had terrible charts.
Yeah. Yeah, so like charts is basically like your lyrics and chord progressions. It's not exactly like piano lead sheets. Where you have the melody. It's just kind of like your chords your chords with the lyrics. That's your good charts. So
and the flow and all, just the way the song progresses. So it's obvious.
Well, that's also part of what makes a good chart, right? Yeah. So what do you guys think? How does this benefit good charts?
It makes it efficient. People don't have to guess.
Yeah.
And that goes along with volunteer burnout. If every single week is a guess, that's like a lot of stress. And the overriding principle is that when a church looks like it's really free flowing and doing well, they probably have really highly planned, organized music. And if a church seems like they're winging it, then they're probably winging it on their chord charts too. So that's like a misnomer. It looks like it's coming off easy, and like they just said, all right, four beat in the key of G and follow me. Like that can work to some degree, but it'll never like have the feeling of like freedom unless it's just a group that plays together every single week for years.
Yeah, and I think if your ministry, if your goal is to attract excellence, I think that excellent musicians, excellent vocalists, excellence in anything, those are people that generally want to be prepared. Like they care about what they're doing, and so they want to be prepared. And so to be able to attract that excellence, I think that you have to be prepared, because that's going to be one of the things that they're going to notice immediately is, are they prepared? Are they giving us the tools to be successful, especially if they have a busy schedule outside of ministry and volunteering. They're going to have certain time slots where they know exactly what they want to practice, and if they don't have those tools, I think that they'll come in and feel kind of stressed or burned out or just totally unprepared.
Yep. Yeah, that's really true. Yeah, because the more crisp a chord chart is, like I know some days in my life, chord charts are left over from I don't know what era, and we're still going with it, partly just out of, everybody knows it. So it's weird for a new person for sure. But another aspect is whenever we do have a new song or a new thing, and I send a text to people and like highlight the fact that don't miss this week. I mean, sometimes you glance through the list, and even this last couple Sundays ago, we did Forever from the Carrie Joe version. I don't know what year that is, but it's definitely newer than Forever. Like
Chris Tomlin.
Forever, a long time ago, Forever.
Yeah. When you said Forever, I was like, oh, Chris Tomlin.
And so one of the guys in the band basically said, yeah, I looked at that list and I thought, I know all those. And he got to practice like, whoa, Forever. That's not Forever. It's still easy. It wasn't that hard, but it was just, you just get into a groove. And so when I send a text and say, hey, don't miss the second song, we've never done it before, and it's all written in there. It's like that song is the easiest one of the night because everybody's really focused on making sure they learn this, because we got to do it right.
That's good. Yeah. Also, one more thing that I want to throw in here for good charts is like, my thoughts on good charts have changed over the years. Because like before, I was like I like the song select chart, song selected and stuff like that. They have their own charts, and you can import those into Planning Center. But then like Tim, for a while, we were like trying to transition it into like how the flow goes, and like I wasn't a believer in it because I wasn't seeing it, you know what I mean? And then like helped out elsewhere at a different church with Drew, and that's how they do it. I'm like, oh, this is what Tim was talking about. This is amazing. And it flows from the start to the finish as you are going through the song, and you don't have to skip around and jump around. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like if I'm using, if we're using Planning Center, I'm using the music app on my my iPad. I just keep scrolling over and it goes. Yeah,
that is good.
So like you were totally like right, and I was totally just like not seeing where you were going. So it was So I think our thoughts and ideas on what's good and what's better or what's great can totally change. So
you almost have to have that flow, because every song, if you're going to base it on. Some people around here run around saying, oh, we doing this recording or this recording. I'm like, oh, I just threw in whatever recording. Or here's the comment I'll get sometimes is, oh, well, on the recording it's this. And I don't even remember what recording is on Planning Center. It's just like, in my mind, it's a reference. Like, we're just going to sing the song our way, but here's how it basically goes.
Yeah.
But lately, that's kind of shifted a little bit to where everybody's like, oh, we're doing this version? Okay. And they learn it like that.
Yeah.
And that's where those chord charts really come in handy, because then that arrangement can be all the way through, and nobody has to wonder. Yeah, it helps the lyric people and everybody. Helps everybody.
Yeah, and it's interesting how tracks have changed some of that as well, because back before tracks existed, you could do it however you wanted, but with tracks that adds an extra level of, well, we might have to play it almost exactly like they did it, or it won't match with the track, and that's added a whole nother dynamic.
And the tracks don't necessarily match recordings.
Yeah,
I mean they kind of do, but you could change it a little bit. But it's been weird. We had that, they created a track for Hosanna a couple weeks ago, and it was to a version that I couldn't even hardly remember. And so I had to go back and like study. And like I've sung Hosanna by Paul Benesh for like in my sleep forever. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I had to like really get the framework of this song. And we had to go back through and take out we had to redo it. And here's another funny thing: when you play with tracks for a long time in that setting, and then like last week, start back up at the outdoor service, the whole band goes out there and just goes all natural, no clicks, nothing. Just play all those songs. And the cool thing is, we basically played it just like the track.
Yeah.
It just like went through just like it was supposed to go through, because that's all we had done the hour before.
So someone wasn't like, intro, 2, 3,
yeah, nobody
4.
was saying that. We could have. We'd done it before out there, but it's just so much more pleasant to not have monitors going outside.
Yeah.
So
that's good.
it was something interesting.
All right, that's the first two. Good scheduling, good charts, and now for the final one, good rehearsals. And we've talked about this before, but what are some of the basic components of a good rehearsal from a band member standpoint, and then also like from a leadership standpoint? So, like, what are those for you? Like, Tim, like, you're the worship pastor, worship leader here at this church. So, like, from that standpoint, like, what does a good rehearsal mean to you?
Part of the good rehearsal for us is the investment in making sure all the sound is working well for that night and that configuration of time. Like, the band, it's not the same configuration every single week as far as a band goes.
Yeah.
So sometimes there's cello player or violin or whatever the other extra things are, flute. And then there's also a different drummer every single week and a different bass player every single week. And so all those things collide to require us to make sure the mixes are good and the packs are right. Everybody has the right stuff, the right time, the right music. Everything's like correct. Mm-hmm. And so we do invest some in that. And then there's the element of connecting with people. So we almost always pray before rehearsal and afterwards. And a little bit, unfortunately, although people always talk about how youth is important in a church, so we almost, as a band, work around the student ministry at our church. So they end at 7:45, and so our rehearsal is kind of late, and as a result is usually an hour and probably no more than an hour and 15 minutes. And so the threshold is make sure that everybody knows all the songs, run through them all, run through a couple of them twice if they need work, run through the new one 3 times maybe, and then it's done. And then we wait for Sunday. And I would say there's that whole adage we talked about before of like rehearse together but practice on your own before. Mm-hmm. So there's that growing culture. And then there's also the idea that anything that's not working on Wednesday, usually by Sunday, is all worked out. Mm-hmm. Like people have gone home and said, oh yeah, man, shoot, I better learn that. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't have Wednesday to get people in that mode, then you would, Sundays would be tough. Yeah. So Wednesday is a rehearsal together, but if there's ever something that's not working right, everybody's like, okay, everybody go listen to that. We'll meet early Sunday or whatever. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, that's a good point. And that's where I was going to go with it, is that rehearsal is the time to bring everything together as a band. It's not the time to be learning your parts. And so kind of having that culture. And I've been in, I don't know, like growing up in a church, it was kind of like we only came on Sunday and practice, for an hour maybe before playing. And that works for some churches, but like to me, the best culture is like having a rehearsal during the week and coming prepared for that rehearsal. So that way, it's not just for you, but also for the sound guy who's going to be there and needs to be locking in things. And, so making sure what you have on Wednesday is pretty close to what you're going to be doing. And then furthermore, like Tim was saying, you come in on Sunday and rehearse a little bit, more, but I would say getting in the habit of what you play on Wednesday doesn't change dramatically on the weekend. So basically you try to stick with what you play on Wednesday for the weekend. If you need to improve some things, like, doing that, but for your sound guys and your other people that are kind of, it hinges on, for making the weekend go off smoothly, like making sure that what you're playing on Wednesdays doesn't change dramatically when you get there on the weekend. So just improving upon that, but not changing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. And half rehearsal, I mentioned sound equipment, but half of it is these days for this whole myriad of people that it hinges on. Like the rehearsal time, that's kind of like the deadline for tracks to be in, because you need them by rehearsal. So all that has to happen, beforehand. And those people need to know what's going on. And that's their part of rehearsal. And then the lyrics people are sitting there running through, making sure all that's good. And that has to be in before rehearsal. So big changes these days affect a lot more than just like the worship leader changing the song.
Yeah, and another thing that, as you were talking about like in-ear monitors and tracks and all that stuff, one thing I was thinking of is it used to be Wednesday before some of that gear was available. You can come and just plug in and just go. But now there's like you almost have to build in a time for like in-ear checks and getting your monitors right and all that stuff. And I've been at churches where that is a really long process and your band members can get kind of frustrated with that. And I've also been at churches where that's really smooth and is done really quickly or almost ready to go when they get there. And so that also is another layer, because your volunteers are giving up their time, but they also need to understand that it's not just for band, it's also for sound people and vice versa. Like all of it needs to be kind of hammered out on a Wednesday, and so that might turn into a little bit longer than it used to because of those different elements.
Well, just getting somebody new in, and all of a sudden they have to learn where the iPad is if they don't bring their own, and what they use, and getting the inner wired up and getting everything ready. You can't show up like 2 minutes till. No, it's like 15, 30 minutes, depending on what instrument you play.
Yeah, and I would say it's going to be different church by church. Probably a lot of churches listening here may not use in-ear monitors, or they might not. Like, for instance, here at Troy, you have other people that use the Family Life Center throughout the week, and so things can get messed up. And so not every situation is the same, but I think it just really starts with the culture of the team and understanding like what needs to happen, and just have that expectation for people as you onboard them and things like that. And if you have a good culture, a lot of those other things that we're talking about will flow from that.
That's true. Yeah, and not only that, most churches that have inner monitors and tracks and bands and all the side of things, they can't even fathom the fact that while we're rehearsing downstairs, there's another group of people upstairs rehearsing for traditional worship with cellos and flutes and handbells and other microphones and organs. Like most people, when they talk about all this stuff, they're like, oh yeah, we just get together that night. And anything around our church, at least, that we talk about is two different veins all the time, simultaneous. So it's been great during the pandemic because we've had a lot of crossover. Like somebody will be down here playing strings and the same person will go upstairs. And now since Easter, that can't happen. It's all overlapping again. So it's all or nothing.
Back to 4.
Yeah, back to 4 and back to all the people that are going to be in. You commit to one or the other.
Yeah. Well, no, that's great. I think, and whenever you're kind of like everyone's reopening and getting back to, if they're going back to all their services, I think that's even more important to have all of these things like, you're scheduling down pat, because now it's not just one, it's 4 or more, it's, your good charts, good rehearsals. All of these things are even more hypercritical than they were during the pandemic, because maybe during that time you were meeting once and maybe it was like pre-recorded and you can have multiple chances to re-record it and stuff like that. So
how often do musicians play at your church?
So it kind of just depends. It kind of just depends, but it seems like at most they would do 3, and that's if we really really needed it, but generally 1 to 2 times a month. And so because and also we have 4 services every weekend that they have to play at all 4, and so it's just a huge commitment. And so because of that, it it goes back to protecting from burnout and things like that. And so for that same reason, making sure everything's in there and accurate, and the culture and all that stuff is solid.
Yep, that's true. Well, just the stakes keep going up. Like the more you have, like add a service or add an expectation or add whatever, at some point, if you're memorizing, and at some point you kind of memorize the songs anyway because you do them enough. So that's like one component. But, at each one of those levels, that lessens the amount of time. So like, you could play every Sunday for a month at this level, but you raise up a few things. You can only play one Sunday a month and use the same amount of hours. Like,
it's crazy to think about. And not only that, there are other things like it limits how many new songs we introduce and things like that, because it just puts you in a little bit of a box. But I think the rewards outweigh some of the negatives. But we don't want to introduce a whole bunch of new songs that people have to learn and memorize. Now we try to keep it kind of familiar for a little bit at least. And so things like that are just a different mindset with different churches. And I think a lot of churches listening will have totally different situations than any of what we've talked about, maybe even. And that's why, to me, it all comes down to culture and expectations for your particular situation, and making sure those are communicated and people know what they need to do.
Yep.
Well, that's awesome. Good. That's great stuff. But guys, thanks so much. And then everyone who's listening, thank you so much for joining us on the Worship Leader Toolbox podcast. We encourage you to share this with your worship team and other worship leaders you know and you should be in communication with in your area. And also join us on the website, worshipleadertoolbox.com. We're praying for you as you continue leading your church in effective ways and keep serving the Lord and lifting up his name.